Alrighty, welcome down to the monthly recap. I realized I kind of feel like Barbie in the new Barbie movie. Hello, Barbie. Anyways, this is a monthly recap for June. It's coming to you today, Friday, June 28th. Obviously, the end of the month will actually wrap up over the weekend. So, given to you a couple days early. June was a really busy month. Pride Month, Father's Day, Juneteenth, busy day with holidays. The Fed had a really big Fed meeting. That's probably what I'm going to spend the most of my time talking about today. Uh, yes, there was no change to the Fed funds rate, but that doesn't mean it's not a big meeting. And it was actually a really, really big meeting. We're really getting kind of get into the weeds a little bit more than usual with regards to some of the Fed's commentary and discuss things. Inflation cools, but as you're going to see, and as I talk about, it's going to be a tough road ahead. So we'll take the progress while we can get it, because it's going to be very hard to make some meaningful progress going forward. It was a mixed bag for the jobs reports. Going to talk about that briefly. Mortgage rates as a whole, they decreased slightly throughout the month. At the end of last month, they were around 7% for a first-time home buyer making less than 120% of the area median income. That kind of scenario. Today, they're right around 6.875. So very small, quite literally the smallest increment. Rates move in eighths of a percent. So smallest increment change there. Let's get into it. So inflation. Aaron's favorite topic, inflation. Aaron's favorite topic and nobody else's favorite topic. I recognize that. But we did see some good progress on inflation. It's worth taking a bit of time and talking about that. So we get the three reports as usual. Consumer price index, inflation as us consumers feel it. Producer price index, inflation as businesses feel it. And then personal consumption expenditures. That's the Fed's favorite measure of inflation. Okay, so on the consumer CPI, consumer price index, headline came in at 0% in May, 3.3% year over year. That was down from 3.4%, so a slight decrease year over year. Core decreased. Core is when they remove the volatile food and energy components from that equation. Again, they don't want these inflation numbers to be completely at the mercy of, hey, there was a breakout of avian flu and now all of a sudden the cost of eggs and chicken has increased, right? Or, hey, the kind of a lot of chaos going on in the Middle East right now. We don't want, oil prices to have these significant impacts on that. So remove volatile food and energy, focus on the rest of it. Okay, the more stable components. The core rate for consumer price index decreased to 3.4 from 3.6%. Again, pretty sizable decrease there. Producer price index. The headline decreased minus 0.2% in May. It's 2.2% year over year. Core came in at 2.3% year over year. Again, the Fed wants all these numbers really to be right around 2%. And they reiterated that stance with their meeting. I'll show you briefly that in a second here as well. And then let's talk about personal consumption expenditures. That literally came out as I'm recording this, a little bit before 8 a.m. That literally came out within the last hour. Right, fresh off the presses. Headline was flat for May, 2.6% year over year. That's down from 2.7%. The core increased 0.1%, but that did decrease the year over year numbers from 2.8 down to 2.6%. So again, the Fed wants these numbers to be right around 2%. They especially want this core rate right here to be at 2%. And it's going to be interesting, but one of the things we're going to talk about is the Fed's commentary on this and how they're actually changing their expectations of what they think that inflation number is going to do. So let's take a look at that in a couple slides here. I really like this comic. I think I finally understand inflation, John. Instead of half price books, it's now 2/3 price books. I'm feeling that a lot right now. All right, so mixed bag with job numbers. Okay, so this really was a mixed bag. So we get three different reports on jobs numbers. We get JOLTS report, which is job openings and labor turnover survey. Okay, so its goal is to try to measure how many help wanted signs exist across the country. Okay, not quite literally help wanted signs, but job openings. Okay, now there's been a lot of debate around this topic because with the new kind of remote workforce, hybrid workforce model, they may post one job in one state, a job with a slightly different title in a different state, even though the jobs are the exact same. And they may be double counting that job or triple counting or theoretically up to 50 times. So it's very hard to say, like, how accurate is this actually painting a picture of the job openings market. But it was worthwhile to note that there was a big slowdown in this figure. So there was 8.355 million openings in the prior report. That came down to 8.059 million. So that's a pretty substantial decrease. Setting that aside, because we're not exactly sure how accurate these figures are, there are a few components of it that are very telling. So number one, this is the fewest since February of 2021. That's worth noting. Second, quit rate was extremely low at 2.2%. Now the quit rate is how many people are quitting their jobs. Okay. Now the lower that goes, the less confidence it says that employees have in the employment market, right? If you're feeling like, wow, there's a lot of greener pastures out there. Everybody's looking over at their neighbor's lawn. Ooh, it's really green over there. Yeah. So when that quit rate is really low, it's saying that us, workers, we have a little bit less confidence in the jobs market. So we're less likely to quit. Bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. We'd much rather take our jobs that we currently have and stay put because we're not exactly sure, if those greener pastures really are all that much more greener. Okay. So that's kind of telling. And then this was also very telling. Job changers. So those that did change their job, they saw their income increase 7.8%. Okay. Now that's significant, but it's a huge, drastic slowdown from the 9.3% in the prior report. Okay. So what that tells you is, look, less people are quitting their jobs, more people are holding onto their jobs because they don't have a lot of confidence in the jobs market. And then, hey, by the way, if you do leave your job, yeah, you'll get paid more. You should be getting paid more. Why else would you leave your job, right? But if you do, you're not going to be making nearly as much money as you were making previously. That doesn't mean you're making less money than you're currently making. It means that the amount of money more that you're going to be making is less, okay? Moderation, okay? Those income increases have been moderating. That means employers have to incentivize those new employees less than they used to have to because they were competing with each other. That all points to a cooling jobs market. Okay. Now, the actual numbers. So we also get the ADP employment report that showed 152,000 jobs being created. This came in lower than expectations of 175,000. So when I said it's a mixed bag, yeah, this one was a little bit soft. But the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, this one came in really hot. 272,000 jobs being created, expectations for 185. So significant upswing there. That's why I called it a mixed bag because, yeah, this jobs opening and labor turnover survey doesn't really paint a great picture. ADP kind of shows a cooling market, employment market. And then BLS just blew it all out of the water and said, no, everything's humming right along. Now, I talked a lot about before, like there's been some significant revisions to these BLS numbers in the past. It's kind of not invoking a lot of confidence in the government's ability to really measure these jobs. But it is what it is. Regardless, it is a mixed bag. Okay. Unemployment rate did increase from 3.9 to 4%. It's going to show up again in a couple slides here. Okay. So let's talk about the Hawks and the Doves, and let's talk about their tug of war match. So we've got Hawks in the Fed. We've got Doves in the Fed. The Doves want to be more financially accommodative. They want to, start cutting rates as soon as possible. The Hawks say, no, we want to keep inflation under wraps. We want to keep rates elevated to keep inflation under wraps. Okay, so we got these Hawks in the Fed, we got these Doves in the Fed, and they're playing this game of tug of war back and forth. So if unemployment ticks up, okay, both Hawks and Doves are going to get more dovish, right? They're going to want to start cutting rates to start to have employers hire more people and keep the jobs market in good shape, right? However, if inflation heats up, then both Hawks and Doves get more hawkish because they say, hey, look, we can't let inflation get out of control. We need to increase the rate or keep the rate elevated for a longer period of time to curb people's spending. And the less money that they spend, it's going to cause inflation to start coming down. So what have we seen recently? So in April, we saw both inflation and the employment market with the employment market was very strong and inflation was very stubborn, right? So everything started leaning toward the Hawks. The Hawks started to gain more momentum in that game of tug of war that they've got going on. Then in May, we saw a cooling of inflation and we saw a weakening of the employment market. So all of a sudden, Doves started to pick up steam and started to control more of the tempo. And then this month, in June, when we got the data for May, it shows, hey, look, inflation is still cooling, as we just talked about, but the employment market is kind of mixed. So it was kind of neutral on that front, okay, which says, great, let's look at what the Fed is actually going to do. So Fed left rates unchanged on the June 12th meeting. It's still in a range of 5.25 to 5.5%. They completed that June 12th meeting. Now, these meetings with an asterisk are the meetings with a summary of economic projections. That's where the Fed actually has to come out and say, look, not only are we just going to give our commentary and tell you what's going to happen with the Fed funds rate, but we actually have to somewhat show you our work. Where do we think things are going to go? That's the economic projections piece. And we're going to be looking at a lot of the economic projections here. So they've only got 2 more of these meetings where they actually have to like put pen to paper and say, hey, where do we think things are headed? That's September 18th and December 18th. That's important because those are the most likely candidates for a Fed rate cut. Okay. Now, it's possible that they could cut rates on July 31st, but usually when they do that first move out of a different move. So, hey, rates were stagnant, and then all of a sudden we need to start hiking rates. Like, they tend to try to do those moves when they have this opportunity to explain their decision a little bit more further, which are these summary of economic projection meetings. So it's possible that they would do July 31st, but it's a little bit unlikely. It's more likely first rate cut is probably going to occur on September 18th. That's when they can actually show their work, explain what's going on, and then go from there. Okay, so let's look at some of these projections. Okay, get your coffee, get nerded up a little bit with me because we're gonna nerd out together. So in March, when they had their last meeting with these again, economic projections, the majority of opinion was, hey, there was going to be 2 to 3 rate cuts. Okay, now people that think there's going to be no cuts are 4 members. That's these dots right here. Okay, so each dot is 1 Fed member. Okay, so 4 members are thinking, hey, no rate cuts, leave it in the rate range that they're currently in. 7 members said, hey, 1 rate cut. Okay, now 2 cuts, that's 8 members. So all of a sudden, with the majority opinion being 2 to 3 rate cuts down to 1 to 2 rate cuts. It's noticeable, but it also is logical, right? The further you get in the year, the less time there is to make rate cuts. Well, of course, it's going to give you less opportunity to actually affect rates, change rates. Okay, so it is somewhat logical, even though the headline was, oh yeah, no, the average opinion is now 1 to 2 instead of 2 to 3. It sounds significant, but we're also just later in the year now, right? So there's just less opportunity for them to do that. Now, by the end of 2025, most are expecting the Fed funds rate to be 1.25% lower. These are these dots right here. So this is 2025. The vast majority of the opinion is, hey, yeah, we think rates are going to be. It's actually kind of interesting to see how many people were in lockstep on this opinion. And then by the end of 2026, most are expecting the Fed funds rate to be 2.25% lower. So down right around here. Okay. And then the longer run, they're all just throwing darts at a board and guessing because they have no freaking idea what does longer run even mean. They're just making things up at that point. But it's worth noting, hey, look, there's probably going to be 1 to 2 rate cuts. The first one's probably going to be, again, at this September 18th meeting, depending on what happens with inflation and unemployment going forward. Okay. Now, that's one big thing that did come out of this meeting was the Fed reminded everybody. Thank you for reminding everybody. They have a dual mandate. Okay, I've talked about it before, how this little piece of rope that the Hawks and the Doves are playing tug of war with is made up really of 2 components. Okay, that is employment numbers and that's inflation. And that's their dual mandate. Okay, so this piece of rope that they're doing tug of war over is their dual mandate. Okay, so they have a dual mandate. Number 1, keep price stability intact, which means manage inflation. Okay. Talked about that a lot, right? Second one is they also need to have maximum employment or aim for maximum employment. So they have a dual mandate. They reminded everybody of this because they're like, look, we are not purely obsessed with inflation. We also care about the unemployment numbers. Okay, that's going to be really relevant here in a second. So Fed reminded everybody that they have a dual mandate. They raised their expectations for PCE, personal consumption expenditures. Okay, so these numbers right down here. They increased it from 2.4% to 2.6% on the headline figure. Okay, so in March they were expecting 2.4. Now they're expecting 2.6. You'll still see longer run. They're still expected to get down to 2%. So they have not let go of that target. They continue to hold on to that 2% target. They also are saying, hey, look, we're probably not going to get there until 2026 now. That's a pretty significant change from previous Fed opinion. They are actually changing their opinion, using a little bit more common sense and saying, hey, look, this is going to take longer than we all thought it was going to take. Thank you for finally recognizing that because we were all the same opinion. Look, this is not going to happen overnight. But the fact that you keep holding on to this really has us all concerned because does that mean you're going to leave the Fed rate elevated? No, not according to this. Not according to this. They're going to start cutting rates this year. So it's nice for them to recognize both things. Yes, inflation is going to get where we want to get to, we think. I still think it's silly that they're holding on to this 2% target, but whatever. 2, it's going to take a little bit longer. And 3, it's not going to stop us from cutting rates in the meantime. Okay, we will still cut rates. Now, they did kind of recognize here, it's going to take them longer to cut rates down to where everybody wants them to get to. So they're going to leave rates elevated. It's going to take more incremental, smaller steps along the way, but they're eventually going to get to where we all need them to get to. They are also acknowledging that's going to be a tough road to hoe. There's no way around it. And I've talked about this in my last couple updates. But yeah, we knew this month was going to be a good month for inflation. And sure enough, it was. Yay. Also, as I've talked about before, like it's going to be harder because the numbers that we're going to be replaced in the future are going to be cooler numbers. And when you're replacing a cooler number with even a tepid number, even a slightly, 0.1%, 0.2%, it's going to cause inflation likely to increase in the meantime. And they recognize that as well. They said, hey, look, core PC is likely going to be at 2.8% by the end of the year. Well, great. It's currently at 2.6%. So they are thinking that core PC is going to actually increase before the end of the year. They are using a little bit more common sense and recognizing what I've been talking about for quite some time, which is it doesn't just matter the numbers that come out. It also matters the numbers that are being replaced. And the numbers that are being replaced when you look at year over year numbers are very, very, very cool numbers. It's going to be very hard to make some meaningful progress on that front. I still think it's crazy that they're holding on this 2% target, but whatever, it is what it is. Core PCs, like I said, is currently at 2.6%. So the Fed is thinking things will worsen from here slightly. I agree. When we look at the numbers that are being replaced, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Okay. Now, these things never move in a straight line. That's not that surprising, honestly. Things never move in a straight line. Okay. So dual mandate, step number one, manage inflation. Talked about that. Let's talk about employment. And this is where I think the Fed is still kind of missing the boat. My 2 cents, Aaron Staufer, 2 cents. Okay. The unemployment rate just hit 4%. Okay. Now, they said, hey, look, we're expecting unemployment to be at 4% by the end of the year. And we're also expected to increase next year to 4.2%. 2026, 4.1%. So they're expecting unemployment to get worse, but not this year. They're expecting to get worse slightly next year. I think that's where the Fed is kind of missing the boat. I think BLS is overstating the amount of jobs gains. I don't think their metrics are very reliable right now. And I think things are likely going to get worse before they get better. Now, what does that really mean? Well, if the Fed is surprised and they've used that to say, hey, what would cause you guys to start cutting rates a little bit sooner, a little bit more aggressively? A surprise to the unemployment numbers. Well, they're expecting 4%. So a surprise would theoretically be 4.1. But they've also come out and said, maybe it's more like 4.2%. So if unemployment does hit 4.2%, that would probably force the Fed's hand to start cutting rates sooner and a little bit more aggressively than they otherwise would. Okay, this dual mandate, they reminded everybody, look, we don't just care about inflation, we also care about unemployment. We also care about unemployment, employment. We want to maximize employment. Well, if unemployment all of a sudden starts hitting 4.1, 4.2%, it could cause the Fed to start looking earnestly at cutting rates a little bit sooner, a little bit more aggressively than they otherwise would. Yeah, I think this is probably the one arena. I'm glad that the Fed changed their expectations on inflation. I think that was smart. I think that was good. The fact that they didn't really change it on the unemployment market is a little bit surprising to me. It tells me that they're putting a lot of weight into those BLS. And there's a lot of articles out there about how BLS is a little bit flawed right now. So anyways, we won't have to wait long to get some new unemployment numbers. Next week is jobs week. Okay, so we're going to be getting the ADP report out on Wednesday. Thursday is July 4th. And then BLS is out on Friday. So we don't have to wait very long to get this updated data. Next week is going to be a very interesting week for rates. Not only do we have jobs week, we also have the July 4th weekend. And during these holiday shortened weeks, a lot of traders go on holiday. Traders go on vacation. When there's less traders working the boost, it tends to mean that there's more volatility in the market. So we'll enjoy the break on rates that we got because next week could be a little bit wonky. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. We're also going to be getting updated inflation data. And then, like I said, the Fed is meeting on July 31st. It's not one of their bigger meetings. If they did do any rate movements then, it would be a little bit of a surprise to the entire market. It would say probably that we got some really rough numbers here on the jobs report front and that the Fed is kind of forced to make a decision sooner than they wanted to. Because ideally, they do want to wait until that September meeting when they have a little bit more of an opportunity to explain what was going on and why they made the decisions that they made. So That is it. Thank you all so much for bearing with me and nerding out with me. I appreciate it. One more time with Barbie. Thank you all so much. If you have any feedback, please let us know. We always appreciate it. And as always, referrals keep us going, keep our business running. So we always appreciate it. We never take it for granted. I hope that shows through with the service we deliver. We try very, very hard. I hope it shows because we do take every referral very, very seriously. So thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you all. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.